Hey everyone, Dan here. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. And keep in mind that these are my own thoughts, opinions, and ideas. These are not meant to be, nor should you take them as, investment or trading advice in any way, shape, or form. Do your own due diligence, put in the work for yourself, and make your decisions based on that. Enjoy.
Alright folks, here we are on Sunday, December 31st. We're going to take a look at T2 today. So T2, if we back out a little bit here, well under this downtrend resistance for quite some time, trying to sort of make a break for it now, with a little bit of a scooping pattern toward the bottom here. I'll put this in just momentarily so you can see what I'm referencing. See that sort of sidestepped its way out after a few gap downs, and is getting a decent amount of distance for the time being. So recent price action has really picked up volatility, starting to spike again, or at least lean toward more volatile times. You see big increases in volume here, accompanied by a bunch of big moves, basically taking the price from the low to mid threes all the way up to the low eights. So huge percentage changes there, with some very big days. Now, a couple of things. One, there were certainly more consistent volatile times in the recent past, right? This is like summertime and into the fall. And so, relative to T2, it's, it's picking up a little bit again, but it's not showing a consistent volatile pattern that sort of has these real outsized moves like we've seen in the past. So my question is this sort of like kicking that off? Is this sort of like a blip on the radar screen, or what exactly is starting to take shape here? That will just sort of take some time to sort out. Now, the other thing is it's getting mighty close to the gap. I mean, it still is quite a percentage away, but knowing that it can move, like this day up over 44%, this day up over 23%, and those days being relatively close to each other, it's not like it can't move, huge percentages over the course of a week or even a month. And so it's sort of in that way, if the volatility is about to pick up and it's going to move to the upside, that puts these numbers, to my mind, potentially in play. So this first gap here is, we would enter it at 1032, it would fill it at like 1650. So I mean, huge, percentage gains away. And then there's another gap up further that it would enter at about 23, and it would fill it at about 2662. So again, just sort of keeping an eye on those, before the big pullback on Friday, I was like, wow, this is just sort of like gunning it toward those levels. But, may sort of completely retrace all of those gains. That could certainly happen. I don't have a super strong level still to place in between these, in an effort to not clutter up the chart. But there is something, probably, I don't know why my cursor keeps disappearing here. It's a fun feature. Around 605, there's likely a bit of a level that takes shape there, and then, all the way down to about 590. So that 590 to 605 range, if it does dip down further, I'd look for it to maybe try to catch some support there, ahead of needing to come all the way down toward this 540. But I mean, if we just look at these moves, I feel pretty good about the levels that were put in, being sort of the dominant levels on the chart. Again, we could put in more granular levels, but it's at the flip side of that is then your chart is more cluttered, and I tend to, over time at least, I've come to the conclusion that it's harder to work with a more cluttered chart, and so I like to keep these dominant levels in and just know that there's going to be some levels that develop in between. So the last video we did was all about the compression of the price action, and basically posing the question of, is T2 about to make a big move because of the intense compression of the price action? So you look at how wide this channel is, this white to white channel, and then through some relative price stability, compressed quite a bit here, and then it widened again, right? And now we're back to strong compression. To my eye, it looks maybe even more compressed than these previous compression periods. So, sort of makes me wonder if T2 still has it in it, like if it still is able to kick up these periods of intense volatility. Is this sort of the precursor to it, like we've seen before? Also, TTM squeeze indicator relatively recently triggered and fired. Now, even though this is a big move over here, if we look at it within the channel, because of the intense volatility, even though this looks very compressed, it's all relative to the overall price action on the chart. And so it's compressed, but still these huge gains. We talked about this day back here, which was up over 23%, and this day here up over 44%. Those still, this one certainly fits in the channel. That's just the mid-range of the channel. That's all that was. Crazy. And then this day just barely stretched out of the channel and then drew right back down into it. So on this view of things, you get a little bit more of a sense of, okay, price action is still pretty compressed, still is sort of showing that potential there. TTM squeeze indicator, trigger fire, relative to the channel, it didn't really go much of anywhere. It hasn't shown the big strong move that I would expect from a trigger and a fire that actually starts shaking out. So to me, that has a couple of questions. One, is it going to come back down to the mid-range of this channel, continue to put in some price action? Maybe it dips a little below, maybe it punches a little bit above, but it mostly just kind of pins itself to the mid-range. Is it going to do that while keeping the histogram relatively flat here? And then eventually it's going to re-trigger and refire, and that's where the real move will come. Or is the move just starting to kick off? Still is a question of which way is it going, but is the move just starting to kick off, and we're going to see this play out in the coming days ahead? That's sort of my question at the moment. What's the situation with this trigger and fire? Because it wasn't a super lengthy trigger, but not bad. And then it's not uncommon to see the fire mechanism sort of start to shake the price action a little bit before it actually breaks the price action, breaks it up, breaks it down, whichever way it goes. And this is sort of like the yet untold story of this move at the moment. But like I said, it can do the other thing. Just remember, I feel like people always think there's two moves. There's either it moves up or it moves down. There's a third move, which is actually quite common, that it moves sideways. And so, I wouldn't discount the potential for it to be dipping back down toward the mid-range of the channel here, being able to hug that for quite a while, and then maybe we get a re-trigger and a refire. That's certainly not an uncommon series of events that we see take place, but I think the first most notable thing will be, does it come down to the mid-range of the channel? And if so, does it sort of pin itself there, or does it plummet through, and then maybe that's the move, right? Because sometimes trigger and fire, we get a counter move and then the real move. Or does it just put in, excessively strong days in the week or weeks ahead, and that pushes it up out of the upper bound of the channel, and then it's like, okay, that's the move, right? It didn't ever need to come down to test the mid-range of the channel, so there was no battle there for the mid-range. But it's just sort of like in a question mark zone for me at the moment between this whole setup that I've just exhaustively talked about, and then this whole setup where it did a good job of escaping that downtrend resistance that we talked about, built a nice base here, tried to push off of it, and it has these gaps just sort of lingering, even though they would be, like we said, huge percentage gains away. It's not like it can't do it based on previous just intense volatility. And that doesn't mean that it's going to do it in a day or in a week or even in a month, right? This could take several months, maybe even a year or more to take shape and actually follow through on some of these. But yeah, it's just sort of what I'm keeping an eye on at the moment. All right, folks, I hope that you are enjoying your long weekend. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and I will see you in the next video.